Hello, everyone. This is Raphael.
I'm Loryn.
We're the Pacheco siblings, and welcome to the Hypercube podcast, a talk show in which two siblings converse about anything and everything. So we're down to kind of the final countdown, last couple of episodes of this season.
Last couple.
Or
last few, at least.
Yeah, last handful, we'll say. And yeah, we're getting there. I don't know if we properly established this within this, but we're kind of shooting for like 12 episode seasons at this point, just to kind of keep it within a manageable range for ourselves, given our life circumstances. So we'll kind of stick with that for the foreseeable future. That might expand if we get to the point where we can hire an editor, I would say. I'd be open to expanding.
That's kind of our main thing. Yeah.
Yeah, in that circumstance. But if it's so long as it just continues to be the two of us, I think we're going to stay at 12 episode seasons because ain't nobody got time for that.
Ain't nobody got time for that.
Or I should say, rather, somebody does, and we would like to hire them. But if we have
the only people who have time for that need to get paid, and we aren't getting paid.
Exactly. So while it's just us, probably 12 episode seasons. But we didn't really have, we have some planned topics left that we want to hit. We have some planned interviews left that I'm really excited for. But for this episode was kind of a freebie. We didn't really know where we were going with it. So I think this might be a good old fashioned freeform episode that we haven't done in a while, that we are deliberately trying to avoid for this season. But alas, we're at a point here where, you know what? I think freeform is the topic of this episode.
Like I was going to say, the structure is that it's not structured. This is the unstructured episode. We have a lot of thoughts. We have a lot of thoughts that individually do not individually comprise their own episode, but combined, they have a theme.
Yeah. Which I guess we'll figure out what that is. But
sure. It's mostly just disparate thoughts that we're all just kind of like,
this is improv. We'll figure out the theme later.
Yeah. We'll do it live.
So that being said, what were we talking about immediately before this? I think we were basically talking about our creative pipelines and learning to be lazy.
I think. Yeah. Well, not learning to be lazy, but learning that we were putting in way too much work before. And during the process of learning and during the process of figuring out what our talents and what our voice is and like what we like doing, what we like, the parts of the process that we actually enjoy putting our fingerprints on, like we were just throwing ourselves at every part of the process and like basically overworking ourselves in aspects that didn't need to have that much effort put in there. Right. We honed our storytelling, we honed our process and like our like workflow, but we probably put too much polish in the areas that don't need that much polish.
Maybe. I don't know if I would necessarily say that, because I think all of the amount that we used to put into content, well, let's call it, to kind of differentiate it from like things that we're doing as proper art. Because I think for me, I do make that distinction now. That is true. Because there are some stuff that I do put ludicrous amounts of polish into still that deserve it, basically, and that are things that I want to be like legacy stuff, right? Like novels or feature films or things of that nature that, I'm in early stages of. I think that kind of stuff I still do that kind of work for. But again, those are things that warrant it, right? Those are like legacy pieces that that are designed to be able to stand the test of time, whether they do or not, is not in my control. But so they kind of warrant putting that amount of work in. But for things that are just content, we've definitely, because I was pointing out how, despite the fact that we're in a really busy period of life right now, I'm preparing for a wedding and you're preparing for travel to go
to a wedding.
And we're insanely busy right now. And yet in this this final quarter of 2023, we've been pumping out way more content than we usually do.
No idea why.
This coming
I don't know how we made time for this.
Yeah, this coming week, we have 3 videos that are going to be published on the YouTube channel, the P-Cubed YouTube channel, which never happens. 3 whole videos. Even when we're trying to do this regularly, we rarely got that many in a week. And so my point is, it kind of worked out that way, right? That was complete coincidence that a bunch of things happened time-wise that kind of lined up, that we had a bunch of content to do in a spurt right now recently. And because there was Separate Ways came out, and I had to do that right away because I knew if I didn't, I would put it on the back burner forever. And so I streamed that, and then we got the War story coming out. Then you have, which I guess by the time this podcast releases, it will probably already be out. And then we had Halloween came up, which we wanted to do a one-shot for. That ended up being Alien Beyond the Veil. But that, of course, that didn't release in time for Halloween, but we still did it. And then that ended up being a two-parter. And then that ended up being a three-parter with the add the roundtable discussion. So that ended up being a lot of content.
Which will also be going up, And
now I'm trying to do also highlights from that too. So it's like a whole lot of content all at once. And I kind of realized in the pipeline we did for that, like we didn't really stress ourselves out on all of this content that we're doing now. Like I don't feel like it really broke the bank in terms of my time and the usage of it, but because we kind of had a pipeline for it that, well, not necessarily, like I don't want to say lazy, but it's like not putting any more work into it as content than it merits, but also realizing, I guess the discovery I made in this process was the fact that we are now at such, or at least speaking for myself, I am now at such a point of like narrative instinct that I can produce things at the same quality that I used to in a fraction of the time, right? I did this very lazily, and what I consider lazily, like we were pitching around the idea of developing a brief intro for Beyond the Veil. What we were planning didn't exactly work out, so I had to put together something. More technical issues, and so I had to put together something very impromptu for the YouTube release, and it ended up being very super cool and cinematic, even though I just came up with it and put it together on the spot. And putting that together and realizing how dope and cinematic it turned out, I was like, wow, that was very little effort, but it's of the quality of something that I used to have to put a lot of effort into. So I think it's not necessarily that, I guess it's learning to be okay with that for content standards, but also realizing that I've grown to the point where my half beans is the same,
it has the same presentation,
gets
as
the
your
outcome
full
of the same amount of quality, and presentation, exactly, as my old full beans. So I guess it's kind of learning that as well, that we have changed and evolved that way to the point where we can reduce our effort and still do something good. You know what I mean? Like there's a base level of good that it feels like I cannot go below now, that did not used to be the case. And therefore I can take more shortcuts because I know more tricks than I used to be able to make things cool and cinematic. And I just have my own shorthand and my own pipeline process for doing that. And I guess I'm kind of getting used to that, used to the fact that I can do that.
And it just comes down to experience. We've done it enough times now. We've been through the ringer enough times now that we know, like I was saying, like we know where the effort needs to go now. We know which part of the process is like the most important to get the right feel, the right effect that we want. And so we can just like hone in on that, get that done, and then everything else will kind of fall into place around it. And I was just thinking, like when you were saying, it's like, oh yeah, like we did all this stuff without too much stress, and I'm over here saying like, you didn't have to run the dang thing, and like
that's also true.
Like running, or rather preparing for Beyond the Veil, like that was a lot of stress. But there is something to say about the fact that two-shot, it ended up being a two-shot. It was originally going to be a one-shot, but that two-shot was done in the amount of time that it would have taken me to do, like, I don't really have anything to compare because I haven't run that many games, but like the amount of content, the amount of like story and like just quality, just quality. If quality was quantifiable, then the amount of that put into that game is significantly more than the time that I had available to put into it for like other stuff, right? Because I knew what to do. I had that shorthand. I knew how to tell the story, or I knew what the story was, first of all, and I knew how to get to that quicker and be able to tell that story in a way that didn't take that much time for me to construct the game, which is, like we're getting to a point now where we can we know the shortcuts and we can get there a lot quicker.
Yeah. Well, really, what you're just talking about is process, right? That's in having a process. And we have a process for a lot more things now than we used to. I guess that would be like the technical artistic term for what we're talking about is process.
It was a lot of trial and error before, and then we're past that now. We passed the trial and error aspect of it.
I mean, really, it was, again, I don't regret any of it because it was our training period, essentially, right? And not to say that we're ever out of the training period, you just move on to what things you're training for. I think you just transition development as a person and as an artist. And it reminds me of something that of a quote I heard more recently, that about life in general, that from a podcast that I listened to, where they had an author interview, but they said something very profound, which was in their book, which is the question of what you want to do with your life. Like, you never stop asking that question, basically, is what they said, and it's like, you don't get to, a point where you're just kind of like, oh, now I'm set. And I think there's this kind of expectation that you do get to that point. I think a lot of people live life as if they have, but it's not really true, is it? You have to constantly be reevaluating yourself and your circumstances and what you're doing.
Well, it's just the answer changes. The question remains the same, but the answer changes. Like, when you're a kid, what you wanted out of life, what you wanted to do is significantly different from what you want now, right? And it's like, the only thing that changed was time and experience and like your understanding of the world. And you realize that like the things that you want to do with your life and the things that you want to spend your time on, they don't come to an end. Like, where it's like, okay, now I have this, I'm done. But like, it's that want changes. It evolves. It's you realize that there are things outside of the things that you have that you want to pursue, or what you do have, you want to improve the quality of what you do have, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, once you have it, you never just you just die.
The scale changes, really. The scale of what you're thinking about changes.
Yeah. And also the way you think about it. Like, it's not just what you have. Once you have it, the way you look at it changes from when you didn't have it. It used to be a thing that you wanted. It used to be a thing that was over there. It used to be a thing that was like a mere concept. But then once you have it, whatever it is, it could be like, something like family, or it could be like a car, right? Like, when you don't have it, you think about it differently than when you do have it. And then once you do have it, maybe that desire is still the same. You still want something from it. And so you augment how you interact with that want. And it's not that like that want goes away. It just changes.
Mm-hmm. Changes form. Which I'll ask the same follow-up question that they asked in that interview then, now that we're both approaching middle age.
Oh, gross.
So what do you want to do when you grow up now?
That's a good question. Nothing. No.
No NBA, no nothing?
No, I want to do a whole lot of nothing. No. That's not entirely incorrect. And I think a lot of people would have that answer. They just don't think about it in those terms. What I want to do is to get to a point where what I want to do is effortless, right? Where it doesn't require an immense amount of strain on either my body or my mind or my time to be able to do the things that I want to do. Like, that's a pretty simple want. When it comes to art projects, or when it comes to pursuing the things that I enjoy right now, at least, there is a lot of barriers in the way of me doing that. And most of it is financial. If I had more money, there would be no effort between me doing the things that I would like to do. So I was like, sure, just if I want that to become effortless, just get more money and I could just do it, right? I could travel with more money. And suddenly that becomes...
Travel more, at least.
Travel more, yeah. Well, travel without the additional stress. And that's kind of what I'm talking about. I would like it to become effortless. I would like to become less, the stressors change from being a negative experience to something that is this is worth the effort and time put into it without it having a detrimental effect on my health in any way.
Yeah. Well, that's a pretty good thing to want to do when you grow up.
Is to do nothing.
Yeah.
But do everything in a nothing way.
Well, you want to do everything and just make it look like it's nothing.
Make it feel like it's nothing, more like. Because I want people to be impressed. No, just kidding.
Fair. So, that being said, everybody go watch Beyond the Veil. It's really good. That's honestly hands down one of your best one shots or best GMing in general that I think you've ever done in terms of storyline that you put together for it. And I had a ton of fun playing it, and definitely a memorable experience that I'll probably be telling the story of for a long time, because it's absolutely ludicrous. And like I said, the first time I felt genuine fear as a player, which I didn't think would be possible in a tabletop RPG medium. And yet you managed to accomplish like actual scares in a tabletop format, which I've heard of people doing. I just never thought it would happen to me. So
thought you were beyond that.
Kudos. Yes. No, I just didn't. It's less that I was beyond that. It's just that I didn't know that I would have access to that quality.
You didn't know that it was possible here in your own home?
in my hometown. I mean, because, if Ivan von Norman walked into the room, or legendary GM John Wick, or, people like that, surely they could make me feel fear. They famously do that. But, it can be done with us. And so you've definitely set a new standard for yourself. So
it's the right kind of combination between again, this session, that last session, a lot of that was kind of like me finally being able to put to practice things I had been thinking about for a long time about like the nature of tabletop games and everything. And I consider that game a proof of concept for the kinds of things I would want to do in my longer form campaigns, because that was
just a very condensed,
it's very condensed,
hardcore difficulty, intense version.
For sure. Yeah. Because like the kind of things that I would like to do in tabletop are very conceptual.
It's a 2-part intensive on your school of GM.
Yeah. And I was just like trying to see like what worked and what didn't. It's like, turns out it all works. Most of it all works. Cause like, that game came out of a long...
The only thing that went wrong was us running in circles.
Yeah. A lot of the things that went wrong, I think, were mostly just like direction problems, which is
that's true. That's true, because there are ways to nudge players along when they get stuck in their own heads.
Exactly.
Which is generally external plot devices that can help them.
Yeah, and like that's just a GM experience type of thing, where it's like, okay, now that I see this is starting to happen,
knowing how to insert those plot devices on the fly. Yeah, that's fair. That's mostly what I think I learned from a whole campaign.
For sure. It's just saying like
insert those plot devices on the fly to keep the story moving.
I've seen you hit the brick wall. Let me just turn you around really quick and say, okay, that quarter that you haven't gone down yet, that's where the answer is.
So, that being said, it definitely is your RPG masterpiece
so far,
and. Yeah, to date, is what I'm saying, especially knowing now that it is a proof of concept of things to come. I will say it is definitely the first time I've played under your GMing where I really felt like it was properly in your voice. You know what I mean? I feel like I think we've both done a lot of things that are trying to meet expectations of what the format is supposed to be, of what the medium is supposed to be.
Yeah, good point.
Not things that were like stories that are characteristically us telling a story in that medium. And I felt like this Beyond the Veil was really your first time where I was like, oh, this is a very Loryn-esque story, that's being told in tabletop mechanics. And that was the brilliance of it. And so definitely your masterpiece to date, but let's leave it on that for Beyond the Veil. Go watch it. It'll be in the show notes and on our channel. Also, first time playing with Dakota Farnsworth, really great. He's amazing.
Yeah.
And probably
he's just
not
great
the last
fun
time
to be
that'll
around.
happen.
It's just great fun to be around.
He really is. We've been having so much fun just talking lately.
Yeah.
Like he's popping into my DMs a bunch these days just with randomest stuff. And we've just been shooting the breeze and it's been fun.
Yeah. I will
definitely. I think the kind of person that's our speed enough that it feels like we've been friends for much longer.
Oh yeah, I get that feeling too, where it's like you can just drop into conversation like your old friends, but it's like we've only known him for.
I mean, even at this point.
Well, like in grand total, like about a year, but like we've only spoken to him a few times, and like most of it was professionally.
That is true. That is technically true. Which is weird to think about. It's also weird to think about because we also have I guess this is the nature of having artist friends in general, is that we all also have parasocial relationships with each other. That's true. Because he listens to this podcast regularly. So that means he's going to listen to this. Yeah, he listens to this every episode of this podcast. So he's getting to this conversation and it's getting really meta. So that's apologies, but also shout outs.
But yeah, I think I've said it before on another podcast. I don't know, it might have been in private, but like, I think I'm coming to find that second person storytelling is my favorite form of storytelling.
I think it might be your calling for sure.
Yeah.
And I think both of us have high ambitions for what we want to do with the RPG medium ever since we discovered it. And I think next year, if I can outline, let me just do some brief CEOing for a second. Sure. And speak as the P-Cube CEO. And talk about
is this a press release
business plans for a second. Yeah, this is basically a press release. So my vision for P-Cubed going forward, I think next year, obviously this year, I think we've reached the limits of what we can do, and because we're in such a busy period of our life, but once everything gets settled on the dust next year, the dust is settled, and we get back into the swing of things, I would definitely, one thing that I think you and I have both talked about is focusing more on products. And actually having like products and services that we offer. It's something that we've been working a lot on this year. And technically we are like freelance hireable. You can find our services on our website right now for the Pennsylvania area, but that's going to be changing coming here very soon. But services will still be a thing, but products as well, because we have so many products that we've been working on for a long time that we just need to get into the business of releasing, because
publishing it,
e-commerce is actually a thing we've been interested in getting into for a while, and we have lots of ideas, but we just haven't actually completed any of them. And especially when the RPG space where self-publication is so easy, it's definitely something that we want to press more into. And we have a ton of stuff in the works that I would love to start releasing next year.
Absolutely.
And making that a priority. So just kind of outlining that as general business strategy on the air, because I think it would give people something to look forward to as well.
Is there something that you can give a little teaser for something that you want to release sometime next year, or at least starting next year? Just give us a little teaser of something that you're working on.
I could give 2 teasers because I think our release for tabletop content will be several-fold, or at least have several different dimensions to it, I should say. Because I think both of us do want to release.
We do everything in multiple dimensions. We can't do anything.
I mean, that's literally the name of our company.
Literally the name of like this is the Hypercube podcast. We're P-Cubed. We are more than 2-dimensional, if anything. That is the one thing you've taken away from our naming convention, is we're more than 2-dimensional.
Yes. Except for our live streams, which are P-squared. So it's exactly 2-dimensional, which is why the streams are just content.
That's all it needs to be. We're playing games sometimes.
Exactly. So really, it's going to be in several dimensions, and some of it is our own original products, but also some of it is our products that are made within open game license for other systems. So I think we have some D&D homebrews that I think are going to finally get official release next year. At least I plan on it, especially the martial arts stuff that I've been developing for the Eye of the Dragons.
Which is the most
a lot of that I want to put into a martial arts package that's going to be released. Really what we're waiting for is 5.5 to drop so that we can get like the latest specs on the that's what it is. Let's not fool ourselves. I know Wizards of the Coast doesn't want to refer to it as that, but literally everybody's going to refer to it as
pretty
that.
Much.
So
when
5.5 drops, which is going to be in early next year, we'll definitely have a better head on our shoulders for how to standardize everything. But so definitely D&D homebrew, like OGL friendly material is definitely one thing we want to do some of. So we'll probably have something like that dropping next year. And also we have several of these in the works, but I think our first original game system will drop next year as well.
I know for a fact between the two of us, it will have to. Like, it will.
One of them will.
Yeah.
Well, because I'm working on a particularly small one, so that one very likely will at least be seeking funding next year and capital to kind of finish it up. Yeah. So there will be that.
Yeah, because I'm working on There are two things I would like to, I guess, formally announce. I'm not sure if this has been posted anywhere else, but I know I've talked about this with a lot of people, where there are two things I think I can like formally announce. Is one, obviously, I guess you already said, original RPG systems, tabletop systems.
Yeah.
That's something that I definitely want to do. Just a few that I have under my belt.
Mm-hmm. There are technically 3 that are in development right now
at this moment.
Yeah, at this moment, there are 3.
At least 3. Hold on. Let me think.
I've got 2.
Because I think I have 1, but it's actually 3, but it's just 1.
It's 3 in 1.
It's 3 in 1. It's almost like there's a thing there. Anyway, so and another thing I want to do is I want to develop a lot of tabletop games, like proper like tabletop like board game style things. So you produce a package, you buy it from a store, and you play the game. It, lasts like 30 minutes. But now there's a couple of those that I've got some work on. One of them is significantly easier to produce, and that will probably be released first. But there's another one that's a little bit more comprehensive that I'm hoping is going to be as big of a deal as I think it is, because I've never seen anything like this kind of a game before. And you think this might be a bigger patented system, basically. This is the kind of thing that I'm like, this is either going to be like
a new genre,
maybe like a new genre of game, or just like go completely like over everybody's heads, or just completely under the radar, and just be a complete flop. And I don't know which way it's going to go,
right?
Because like it's just so different.
Either way, probably going to be seeking more. Because again, we're in design stages for a lot of this stuff. Probably going to be seeking more capital,
very early
and funding on that in the coming years. So we'll see how that goes.
Sometime next year, we're going to start being more public and vocal about getting those projects off the ground. Yeah, business. We don't talk about business too much on the podcast. We really there's probably a lot more that we can talk about that we don't. You know what I mean? That's probably true.
It's like, that's probably true. There's we don't have to be hush hush about everything. But
I think that's another thing.
We can just self-censor ourselves because this is an edited pod.
Yeah. I think that's something we need to be more comfortable with is, one thing I've wanted to always be is like as transparent as possible, right? Is like, this is true. Because there is like, obviously we want to protect trade secrets as well. We don't want to spill all of our beans, but at least for me, I've got like enough of I've experience in being a public persona that like I know how to control or abstract my speech on the fly really easily, so it's like I could easily talk about literally anything, even things that I'm under NDA for in a way that doesn't get me in trouble. You know what I mean? Like I could abstract things pretty easily. But also if it's like our stuff, like drip feeding that information is also a useful marketing tool as well. And that's something I don't think we've been really taking advantage of. This is true. Because that's true. Because the fact that this is really our first public acknowledgement of all the systems we have in the works probably shouldn't be the case. Although I have acknowledged some. I've been because in Resin Roleplay, I guess I could talk about this because this does exist in the comments of our videos. You probably haven't seen this. I think I might have. I went back recently and looked at some stuff. Yeah, the homebrew system that we used for Resin Roleplay is out in the public, and people often comment on those old videos seeking the system. It's like, hey, where is it? And I always point them. Yeah, I always, because people actually really like that show and the system that we're using. So I always reply to the comments to point people in the direction of where they can get it, but also give them a tease of the fact that, hey, we're working on something that will succeed that system, basically. Something that will that will be a kind of larger version of that and something more complete. Yeah. So that's what one of the systems we have in the works is something that will just say be a more refined version of what we were doing in Resin Roleplay. Yeah. Something that's more entirely our own and less built on like the legacy of something else. Exactly. Yeah. Something more comprehensive and more original, but basically a spiritual successor to that system. Yeah, that's what it is. So, yeah, that's one of the systems we have in the works. But yeah, exciting stuff ahead. Exciting stuff. So So interestingly, that's not what we originally wanted to do when we started recording, was talk about business stuff.
Well, we said this was a freeform episode, so freeform we shall be.
Freeform we shall be, because I do want to get back and I do want to talk
we had some
about
topics we wanted to revisit.
Yeah.
I have a few topics I want to revisit from earlier in this season as well.
Yeah, I would love to go back. And I think maybe, I don't know if this is like, if there's enough to say about like every individual episode, but I want to go back and look at all of our previous episodes and be like, okay, am I still on board with what I said here, or did my opinions change, or do I have anything extra that I wanted to add that didn't make it into the episode, kind of thing?
Yeah. See, I definitely had some stuff. We had some interesting discussion after the AI episode that had some quality elaborations. However, I was considering putting some of that into a video on my personal channel that I've already started scripting for. So I might reserve that stuff. But, well, I guess it doesn't hurt to talk about it in more than one place, because who's going to watch both? Okay. Because there was one elaboration where, because we weren't entirely planning to be entirely apologetic about AI in that episode, but I think it kind of worked mostly that way. However, there was one serious critique that we had that didn't make it onto the recording that we wanted to talk about as well, which was the fact that the issue of basically artists' rights in how their work is used to train AI models. We didn't really get to talk about that, and that is something that is a genuine concern of ours. Yeah. That is something that I think is worth being concerned about, because it's pretty unprecedented territory, but it's also something that's going to have to work itself out in the legal system, basically, because it's not really something that I think it's in any one individual's controls. I think it's going to be something that has to be worked out in courtrooms, because it's a complex issue and one that there's zero precedent for practically. And it's definitely something entirely new, and it's something that we need to figure out what the compensation models of this are going to be going forward, and especially what the agency is going to be for artists, because that's definitely something that people, as it is now, like, people have art that is being used to train AI models inadvertently, right? Against their knowledge or against their will, without their consent. Yeah. And so that should not be the case, first of all. So it should be an opt-in thing.
Theft.
And exactly. So that should be an opt-in thing. I think that's just common sense privacy concerns, but it's, in addition to that, those who do opt in should be properly compensated. Yeah. And those are the models that I think need to be worked out in the legal system.
Did you hear, since that episode has come out, there has been a few strikes within the entertainment industry, and
you don't say.
Did you hear about the AI stuff that was written into the SAG strike stuff?
I don't know about the SAG strike. I was following the writer strike more closely for obvious reasons.
Well, obviously,
but I do know both strikes. They were on a number of issues. Yeah. And I think the AI stuff was like some of the stuff that made most of the headlines, but that was like very minor stuff in the list of complaints that the unions were lodging. Those were very small,
like headline grabbing stuff though. Like that's like,
yeah, it was for sure. I think that those got over headlined, but they were pretty minor in the scheme of
like
issues
actually
that
getting paid, right? And like
unions were we're raising, because a lot of it was compensation structures in royalty and what's it called?
Getting paid.
But a lot of it was just compensation structure stuff, and a lot of
compensation and
a lot of other issues.
Minimum
basic stuff. Agreements. Yeah. So a lot of it had to do with all of that, but there was some AI stuff in there as well. And I was actually, in looking into it, I was pretty pleased to see that they were basically like common sense AI restrictions. Like there wasn't anything that I would consider drastic as somebody who sees the potential of AI as a tool to be used. Yeah. So the writer's strike definitely had great terms that I think they had around the limitations on AI that I think were pretty common sense and pretty agreeable. And because it doesn't restrict the use of AI entirely, it just places limits and caveats on how and when they can be used and what disclosures have to be given, which I think is great to have. I think disclosure structures is really going to be, I think, that's the future of a lot of this stuff. Yeah, which is because I think there's a lot of stuff that people would be okay with if there was enough transparency around it.
Yeah.
Right.
And especially if you go into like how much of a project was like informed by AI, because like it's just Pandora's box stuff, right? Like that, it's already been open. You can't not use AI. Like, what are you going to do? Like, well, this just goes back to prohibition in general. Like, prohibition has never ever worked, like ever. And
right. You
can't like once it's there, it's like, all right, we're just not going to use AI anymore. Someone's just going to not tell you that they're using AI, and then what are you going to do about it then? Like, there's no getting around the fact that it is a very useful tool. And even if it wasn't a very useful tool, it is a tool and people are going to use it. I'm sure there are like, even before like the comprehensive generative AIs that we have now, there were people who were using some kind of generator to quickly, pump out like, like pulp fiction kind of levels of writing, right? Like that's just the kind of thing that you can do. You can go on these like very basic AI websites and like kind of generate your own little like fanfic of different stuff. And it's just out there, and it's going to exist, and it's going to be a part of your art if you have enough people involved. That's just how it's going to be. You can't get rid of it, but what you can do is you can monitor it. And when you monitor it, then you start to regulate it. And then it starts to become more integrated into the process as opposed to invasive into the process.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So what were the SAG qualifications that you were talking about?
I'm not sure exactly what all of it was. All I know is I heard a lot of people talking about it, right? But basically a lot of extras have more protections for their likenesses being used as AI fill basically crowds. Because if you're an extra and they shoot you on set, they're just like, yeah, we have your likeness now. You weren't in this scene before, but now you are, and you're not going to get paid for it. So there's a lot of stuff like that it just extras have a lot more protections against
extras now. Protection is good. Although that's a thing that I think Ren was talking about, Ren from Corridor Digital. He was talking about the fact that extras roles may be a thing of the past coming up thanks to like AI generative crowd simulations basically. And so it does make you wonder how many more of those extras jobs we're going to see, but I don't know if they secured a future for that basically as part of their negotiations, because extras are classically a gateway into the industry as a performer.
This is also something that I think I want to, I guess, like elaborate on when in the AI aspect of it, because we kind of at the end is like, where do you see, like, how do you see AI affecting like the future of like just like art or like just jobs or anything like that in general? I think I figured out a better way to word what I wanted to say is AI is going to make, or maybe I did say this, don't remember, but AI is going to make entry-level jobs obsolete, right? And entry-level jobs, like being an extra, that's going to go the way of the dodo, in the same way that like voiceover work is like very standard, like voiceover
commercial
work.
voiceover. Like we were saying, we did go over that in the last podcast. I think commercial voiceover is probably going to die out thanks to generative AI.
That's going to go only because it's cheaper for the studios to just like draw from a bank of faces to throw into a crowd than it is to have actual physical people they have to pay for their time,
to pay
and
literally
then you have to feed them, and they have to house them, and then
to pay an army of people minimum wage.
Exactly. Like it's just cheaper, and that kind of stuff is going to change. But like the way like entry level jobs they're going to go away, and eventually what you're going to be left is like skilled jobs, and eventually what you're going to be. What your entry level jobs are going to look like are basically all jobs that are going to be kind of paywalled or like hidden behind like certificates or degrees or anything like that, right? Where if you want to be an actor and you want to get into acting, doing a lot of small local stuff, whatever, to like get your chops up is not going to be able to be in anymore. You have to actually either know somebody or have some kind of qualification to be like a line actor, I guess. Character with
so
lines.
Basically major roles are going to be all that remains
essentially. But what I think is also going to happen
roles
is you're going to have different kinds of like entry level stuff where you get paid instead of being I want to say body actor, like a body actor in film. You're going to be paid for your likeness, where you can submit your face, you can submit your likeness, and like you put on different outfits, you go to a modeling shoot, they shoot you from all different angles in like a HDRI setup or whatever, and then you just get whatever the word was we thought of before. Was it royalties? Was it dividends?
Right. For the word we're forgetting.
Yeah, the name we're forgetting. And you do that. It's going to be a lot different work where you're still basically doing extras work. Your face is going to be in like TV shows and movies and in the background of stuff. You never were on set for any of those days, but your face is in a database. You've given permission for your face to be used in these kind of projects, or you've like excluded your face from being used in these kind of projects. And then you just have that out there and you get paid. You got to send a check in the mail every time your likeness gets used. I think that's the way it might go. I don't know. I can't wait to see it. But like that is all I know is that it's going to be very different. And what we're doing now is the models that we have now are so antiquated and have gotten antiquated very quickly.
Residuals also. That's
Residuals. We found it.
I just looked it up. I finally got tired and looked it up. So
very, very close to royalties.
Very, very close. And very close in concept as well. But that's beside the point. But yeah.
Residuals.
Yeah, I mean, I think in an ideal world, that would be the case that basically the entry level gets brought up and up. Yeah. And I think we do already have seen the beginnings of that just being in the information age and with how accessible technology is for projects these days, right? Because even us, right, we've created paid roles for people. Mm-hmm. And just because technology has changed in such a way that the threshold, the barrier to entry gets smaller and smaller, which means as a result, you get more and more projects. Mm-hmm. And, not all of them are going to be great projects, but there's still more of them. And because there's a bigger variety of projects, there's more places in which you can get major roles in order for those to be the entry. But exactly, that being said, I think what you're describing almost, I guess the future that you're describing, I guess what I'm kind of envisioning, makes me feel like, and let me know what you think of this, because at this point I'm getting into just prophetic stuff. This is pure speculation.
Oh, same with me. Like I'm throwing stuff out there.
Yeah, we're just speaking out of our butts right now. This is pure speculative territory.
It is worth noting that like every time I'm on the podcast or anytime my voice is recorded or anytime that I have said something in a professional or like a archived manner, I'm just throwing stuff out of my butt. All right. Like half the time I'm not serious and I just want to see if I'm right.
Or see how people react.
Or see how sometimes. That is very true. Or just see how people react to it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's definitely something people have to get used to.
I don't interact with truth in the way other people do.
You very much don't. And I think it freaks people out. But I think there are mental differences at play there, just neurologically. But so yeah, it's purely speculatively. Let's dive deeper into that speculative territory though, because the future you're describing makes me almost think of, do you think that the future of art in that sense and production art, right, like film, right? Film is very much a production art in a way that not all mediums are, but production art like film, like music, like stuff like that. Do you think that's all going to become very localized? You know what I mean? Where you're going to have more and more basically startups like us who are doing stuff at the local level. And anybody who wants to get into the industry can get into the industry where they are instead of having to uproot and go to Austin or LA or Texas, or rather New York. Mm-hmm. Austin, Texas was the middle one.
Yeah, go to Austin or Texas. Pick one.
Pick one. Two different places entirely. Austin, LA, New York.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, do you think that's basically that the future is more local in terms of industry?
I think that's combined with something that we were talking about before. And this is like more of a personal conversation we were talking about on what we wanted to do as creatives. And we were saying we were going to take on a more of like a producery role as opposed to being like talent or being like part of crew, right? We're going to take on that producer role.
Yes. Well, that's something that I've kind of come to accept more. We were talking about this offline a bit rather recently, which is, I've kind of embraced more the fact that my role within the industry is that of like a capital P producer.
Yeah.
And because of the fact that I'm not going to be in locations where the industry is abundant, my kind of role is to be the person that brings the industry with me, who creates projects, who creates opportunities for other people to partake in it. Because everywhere that you do go, you don't always have an industry, but you do always have people
There's
who
no hub.
want to be
Usually
in the
no
industry.
hub.
Yeah.
So I think what you're asking is, are more people going to realize that that's the role that they have to take on? And I think that might be the case.
Is being a producer. You think we're going to see more producers, basically? I
think a lot more people are going to realize, like, all right, I wanted to get into the industry, and the ladder that was presented to me was, you start at the bottom. Maybe you come in as an extra, then you work your way up. You talk to whoever you need to talk to. You rub some elbows, and then suddenly you're given control of a project. Maybe you're a director for a few small projects, and then somebody notices you, and then they give you a role. Or they give you like a studio job, and now your name's out there, and you have like these big studios on your name. Like, now I've got all this like this cred, right? Then I could start making the projects I wanted to make, and that was like kind of the idea. That was the ladder that they were presented, that they had to take to get to the role that they wanted, which was maybe a producer. And they realized, I could just start at producer. Like, I could just take what I know now, having done probably like a lot of indie films. If somebody is that dedicated, they've done indie, they've done their own stuff in the back, in their backyard. And then they realized that
YouTube.
Yeah, they've done YouTube, they've done TikTok, whatever they need to do, right? And they realized the industry localized in all these little areas or not localized, but like the industry that has been like accumulated in all these areas, like, like LA, like New York, they're less and less important as a geographical necessity. Like, you don't have to be in those locations to be a part of the industry, because people, like you're saying, there are people everywhere who want to be in the industry who just aren't there, right? They're not physically there. Like, they're not literally in LA, in Hollywood, shooting on sets, but they want to be, and they're doing local stuff. And then you realize, oh, there's people literally all around me who want to be in films. All I have to do is ask and say, hey, I'm shooting a film. Would you guys like to be in it? And people just come out of the woodworks like, oh, I've always wanted to be an actor. I've always wanted to be in a film. I've done a lot of local theater. I've been in theater for like 15 years.
Community theater.
Yeah, community theater. It's like, yeah, I'm a pretty good actor.
Never been paid.
Yeah. Oh dear. Yeah. And it's like, I think people are more and more people are going to realize that they don't have to go the route of the big studio exec to do the thing that they wanted to do, which was produce film. And they're going to realize that it's a lot easier, especially with all the tools that are out now. Like the accessibility that there is. That there is. Just
you don't
to
have to chase
produce.
The studios.
Yeah, you can. I think people are going to realize they can become their local hub, right? Wherever they are, if there's nobody making films there, they're like, I'll be the one to start it, and maybe that might be the case. And then all the big giant, WB. Marvel Studios, they're going to be taking the shortcuts because they can afford to. They can afford to save money, right? But if you're a local content creator or a local filmmaker, you're going to do things the old-fashioned way. You're going to get your hands dirty, and you're just going to go out there and you're going to shoot films, and then maybe you'll work up to be able to take those shortcuts, those same shortcuts that all the the big names can do, but you're still going to have to work your way up to that point where you can afford to take shortcuts.
Yeah. But that's the thing, is like what this conversation is emerging out of is the fact that those shortcuts are getting more and more accessible, right?
Yeah.
So VFX tools, AI generated, enhancements to visual effects or things of that nature. Like, all these things are things that will make those shortcuts that previously only were the domain of studios available to people at a small scale.
Yeah.
And
it's like, when I say build your way up, I don't mean like to millions of dollars. Like, I'm talking like maybe just enough where you don't have to have a full-time job. Now you have a part-time job, and now you have more time to dedicate to rendering. Now you have more time to dedicate to learning the VFX and learning this new AI program, because like affording when I say afford, I don't just mean money. Like, it's time, it's effort, it's like mental capacity. Like, do you have the, like, are you just not stressed out by, your full-time job? Maybe your job that's like has mandatory overtime. Do you have like the mental capacity to go home and say, now it's time to watch 3 hours of tutorials? Right.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's a fair point. That's a fair point. So really what it sounds to me like the future we're envisioning here, which is purely speculative at this point. It sounds like a fair prediction to say that the industry, right? The arts industries and the entertainment industry is going to kind of go basically in the direction that like education has gone in recent years.
Ooh, that's a good
people.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, in the way that college has become perceived as less and less necessary, because in effect it is, but I think there's that same perception perhaps that will hopefully begin to happen with the industry, that will cause a lot more local startups to start creating hubs in their areas.
Maybe there is precedent for this then.
Yeah, because doesn't it kind of sound familiar? Like, as you're explaining it, that sounds like basically what the education industry has been going through.
Autodidacticism is going to replace the degree,
because people are getting like people are getting like, graduate levels of knowledge, from people who, granted, mostly from people who have gone through and gotten the degrees, but like still lots of people are sharing that stuff just for free online these days, right?
Yeah.
And people who have like gone through the proper route, so actually know their theory and know their textbooks and whatnot, but they are now distributing that of like the same information, right? The same kind of information that used to be so gated and so guarded is now just being, put on YouTube, and there's such an incentive to continue putting it online, right? Because it's actually turning out to be profitable to be an edutainer, that they're going to keep going until they exhaust that content, and now all of a sudden you've got whole graduate level courses online. So I think that's a large part of the reason why education has seen that decline. And right, you're seeing such a decline in college attendance, not only because of the fact that people feel like they can get a lot of that same information, or that feel like they have easier career routes to go down.
Yeah.
But also the fact that it's just like nobody wants to take on that debt anymore. And,
it's a big deal.
Turns out it's a big deal.
That's a big turnoff,
and also a whole generation of people got disillusioned with it who did go down that route. And now they're raising their kids to not go down that route. Mm-hmm. And so, although there's one trend, I guess, regarding kids that we haven't talked about yet on the podcast that I don't think we've talked about on the podcast. Maybe we've talked about it offline, but which is the, birth rate trends, which is the fact that like among Zoomers and onward, there's basically like people are delaying major life milestones, or what used to be considered major life milestones, a lot, and particularly a lot of people are going down the route of either choosing like not to have kids, or like delaying having kids till much later than previous generations. But it's very interesting because the projections for how this is going to manifest in just like a generation or two are very wild. And it's just like that is one of those statistical things that's going on right now that pretty much all sociologists are kind of freaked out about, because we don't have really a huge precedent for it. And it's going to start affecting things big time as soon as certain generations start dying out.
Into the workforce
and, as well. Yeah, and then while another generation enters the workforce, right?
But rather,
also, it's worth noting
that generation might not enter the workforce if there isn't that generation.
Exactly, yeah. So, there's going to be, the weird like trends that's going to lead towards, and the way the population is going to take shape, especially when you're noting that simultaneously right now, one of the biggest ever generations is dying off, and one of the, the up and coming generation is not wanting to have kids,
shrinking,
right? So you're right. So it's actively shrinking. So those are two trends that are going on simultaneously that pretty much all sociologists expect to have huge ramifications within the next generation or two. Then I'm very curious how that's going to play out. But one thing's for sure, there's going to be a lot of jobs.
I think I was reading somewhere like globally, the birth rate.
It's worth noting. This is a global trend. This is not a purely American thing.
The worst part is that some places it's way bad. Like it's worse in some places than others. I think like some places in Asia have a very, very steep birth rate drop. And I remember reading, I don't remember if this was accurate, but I think I remember something like in the United States, birth rate's dropping, but its population's remaining about the same. And that's purely off of immigration, of people coming to the US to live here. And it's like, you look at those numbers and you kind of like you kind of extrapolate that, right? Birth rate's going down. That means fewer Americans are being born, and people native to America. And then immigration is keeping that about the same, which means immigration is increasing. So at what point does do places like America become more immigrants than native people born in America?
Native born. Yeah. Yeah, native born is the technical term.
Like not Native Americans, but like
yeah. No, it has a different implication, but that is the technical term.
Yeah. Like for America, you gotta have to like make sure that you're
you gotta be careful
because it's like, and I think there are other places like that too, where it's like their populations are remaining the same, but their birth rate's decreasing because the immigration is increasing, and more and more people are like moving to that place. So it's like, at what point does Made in America not have any meaning?
Oh, yeah. Well, that's worth noting as well, because that reminds me of another very interesting statistic, which is the fact that I'm not sure if you're aware of this. I didn't hear about this until like this last week. And I'm like, how did I not hear about that? In 2020, lots of things happened in 2020. But one of the many things that happened in 2020
of the many things
that happened in 2020 were that in the United States, it officially crossed the threshold in the year 2020, where over 50% of people below the age of 18 or 18 or under,
Gen Zers,
are people of color.
No. Okay. So there's been a couple of those things.
Yes. And I'm like, that's crazy to think about.
Hold on. There's another statistic as well. Hold on. Stand by. Okay. So talking about the change in like generations and the change in demographics, right? So Gen Z, I think there was like a poll, or like not a poll, like just census information, right? From 2022. And I think actually, no, it started in 2020. Yeah. So 2020 to 2022. So there's new information that the percentage of people who identify as LGBT. So you take the previous generations, and there's kind of like this similar amount of people who identify as LGBT. For Gen Z, right? People born somewhere between the late 90s and like turn of the millennium. Do you know what that number kind of hovers around? 20% of Gen Z people identify as LGBT. 1 in 5 people identify as LGBT. That is insane. Okay. That's more than double some of the previous generations. That might be more than triple some of the previous generations.
Yeah.
And it's like,
that's crazy. That's definitely the highest that number has ever gotten.
Has ever been.
And
people who identify. And here's vocally identify, I should say, because like the thing is, when a statistic like that comes out, you have to question, is it more people that are coming out and identifying as that thing? They've always been that way. They're now comfortable saying it. Or more people now just becoming LGBT? Like, is the number of LGBT people just growing? Or did our definitions of LGBT change that include now more people, right? And the thing is, as time's going to go on, minority groups are going to start being less of a minority group.
Right, and more just the norm.
more of the norm, as those numbers kind of like plateau out, because obviously it's not going to grow. It's not going to like continue to like. It's not going to eventually get to 50%. It's not gonna, like it's not. That's not going to happen. But once that plateaus out, and we see how many people like are more accurately identifying as these like marginalized groups. And you're saying like, more than half the people in the United States are now are people of color.
Well, over half of people 18 or under.
18 or under, that's what it is. But that will eventually become half as the years go on, right?
As the years go on. Yeah. Inherently, in a generation or two, things are going to start looking very different in this country.
Very different.
Which
is combining those two statistics, right? It's like, what the heck is the culture going to look like?
What is it going to look like? Well, that's the thing. We're in the middle of huge cultural upheaval right now, right? Needless to say, I didn't have to even say that out loud, but I did.
But I did. So, understatement of the century.
Yeah, understatement
cultural
of the century.
Upheaval is happening.
Nobody noticed.
You heard it here first.
Yeah. We're in the middle of huge cultural upheaval, though, right? And like you said, it could be like definitions are changing. It could be like just more people are comfortable identifying. Either way, suffice to say, the culture has vastly changed, and no doubt that's having an impact on the data. And to what extent it's hard to say. You'd need a meta study on that.
It is changing. It will continue to change as well, because this is all new information coming out.
Right. Because cultural values are changing, and expectations, and, you know, in lots of interesting ways, right? I'm not going to render any good or bad judgments because I don't think that's material to the conversation right now. Yeah, but, you know, you can have your own opinions about that, but things are changing. You can't deny that. And we're in the middle of vast cultural shifts, which is very scary for a lot of people, because like the statement that things are going to look very like this country, not my country, I should say at this point.
Right. Because I'm not there anymore.
Yes. But the fact that this country is going to look very different in a generation or two is a very scary thing to say, you know, aloud. Yeah. And regardless of whether you think that's good or bad, that's a scary thing to say, because
you're going to see it happen.
Yeah, exactly. You're going to watch it happen. And right now you think there's a lot of like issues that are going on societally. Imagine what it's going to be like then, right? Because it's going to, when the camps are a lot more evened out. And I think what you're seeing now, especially on the kind of far right wave, is a lot of reaction to those trends. And especially because a lot of it revolves around basically just like fear of diminishing cultural power, right? Which, you know, the response to that is very problematic. However, the diagnosis of the issue isn't wrong, because like Anglo-Protestant culture is on the decline. There's no doubt about that. That is simply no longer going to be the dominant cultural force in America going forward. I just do not see that being a reversible. Yeah, I don't see that being a reversible trend at this point, especially with, I guess, with the way that culture has attempted to defend itself. It's chosen basically the least sustainable way of doing so.
The least effective. You
know, the least persuasive way, especially.
That is, right? Yeah, that's a good way to put it, at least.
It has not gained sympathizers.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's inherently a movement that cannot grow.
It's death throes.
Yeah, exactly. It's death throes, right? It has reinforced itself in this cocoon that basically fortifies its base, but is impossible to expand. And
it doesn't allow for newcomers.
Exactly, right? Inherently. It's just kind of part of the design that's built into that thing. And so you're getting these huge populist movements right now that are, well, possibly the death throes, right, of a dying culture, because of just the position that they've set themselves in. Although there is, I don't know if you want me to get into it, but I think there is a way in which it might not be death throes, which is purely tying back to the statistic that we were talking about earlier, which is birth rates. Birth rates generally declining, younger people not wanting to have kids generally across the board, except in more right-wing circles, in which, you know, that's the trend. There's still a bit of the same trend, but it's less prominent among, well, religious groups in general, first of all, not just Anglo-Protestant people, but religious groups generally do tend to be more family oriented. And so there's the trend is definitely a lot slower on those sides. And so that's the only thing that I could see buffering it, is the fact that people on the far left are going to be having a lot less kids than people on the far right, which it does tend to be something that like is basically one of the primary ways that it's still surviving, in that, you know, in a lot of those cultural mindsets is basically just passing down legacy to your children, and basically rearing them in the same kind of mentality. But that's like the only way that I see it surviving, right? Because it can't grow culturally and ideologically, but it can grow genealogically,
right?
Which is, you know, that is still a thing that can happen. But still, that being said, the trends are pretty stark, just looking purely at the data. And it's hard to imagine that reversing on a large scale, because as much as that population growth might be, you know, or that cultural growth might be extended genealogically, it doesn't change the fact that the biggest population centers are the ones that are seeing the larger trends. And that's only going to continue to grow. Yeah. So anyway, we're getting into kind of nerdy data stuff here, which, you know, I don't know if that's great podcast listening.
Yeah, some data analysis.
I definitely,
I'm not prepared to dive. I'm not prepared to dive into data analysis in any depth, because
yes,
we could if we wanted to, but that's an entirely separate thing. Yeah,
entire podcast we need.
That requires some presentation.
For sure. It's definitely been on my mind a lot lately, especially some podcasts I've listened to have been doing a lot of presentations on this kind of data, so it's kind of fresh on my mind. Definitely owe a lot to Ryan Burge, who's kind of considered one of the premier social scientists on religion in America, and really does really great data analysis and research on this stuff. So huge voice on that front. But yeah, it's very interesting to see those trends, and it's kind of again, regardless of what you think, it is a scary thing to be in the middle of that much cultural change. And I think, at least for me, the question it's kind of weird to see. Well, exciting and scary are the same thing, aren't they?
Yeah. I guess that's true. It's just your response to it.
Yeah. So, but it's kind of interesting because, especially seeing how this manifests in the church, I guess that's kind of the one of my primary concerns. Because on the one hand, right, you've got there's a lot of people in the church world who don't know how to exist as a cultural minority, despite the fact that that's how the religion started, right?
Right.
And that's definitely where a lot of the fear-mongering comes from, is basically the segments of the church that don't know how to exist as a cultural minority and are terrified of the idea of having to do that.
Yeah.
But then you have a lot of people in the church.
About that aspect of that culture.
Then you have, exactly. And then you have a lot of people in the church, let's say, the people of color churches, who are just like, right, so business as usual, right? So it's like, right, who just have a lot of ideas about how to exist as a minority, and where like whether or not they have cultural sway or not has never been really a factor in how they worship. Like that's never changed the way they practice their faith, because they've never been in a position where they're a majority. So it's kind of weird to see those differences in reactions. It's definitely, I think that's why Christians of color in the US are definitely having a lot easier of a time now, because it just means that it's just like, okay, now my identity is a little bit more consolidated in minority camps going forward. Right. And that doesn't ultimately make a huge difference in the way we operate. It's just that, now a lot of our brothers and sisters have to do the same thing, who have no concept of this. And it's like, so that's kind of fascinating to me.
And probably the fact that a lot of those people who are feeling that are pretty much only subscribe to a certain belief or a certain religion because it does have that cultural aspect, that cultural sway. It's like, like bandwagon religions, where it's like, this is the biggest one, I'm gonna join that group because they're the ones who are gonna win. And then they get on that team, right? They think about it as like in terms of like winning the culture war. And it's like they get on that team, and when that team starts losing, quote unquote, heavy air quotes, in their head, they don't know what to do, because they're like, I've already dedicated like my identity to being a part of this losing team. What do I do now? I can't just like backtrack on that, because what do you do about it? And then like, there's a lot involved in that.
I definitely have strong opinions about that. Of course, about religion in general, being in my position, but it's definitely, I'm not afraid to say that there is a lot of idolatry at play. I think and you see a lot of that coming out now because of what's going on. Yeah. I think we're really getting an apocalypse of it, in the literal sense of the term, right? Apocalypse meaning like an unveiling is what it originally means, like a vision. And we're basically seeing an unveiling, I think, of what people had faith in. And I think it's been very enlightening to see. And I think it's been very encouraging to see, I guess, who has remained pretty unchanged in certain ways, right? Faith-wise. And it's like in getting to see those examples of what a life built on a solid rock looks like that we read about in scripture. And I think we're seeing plenty of examples of that, and plenty of examples of people whose faith was not in something transcendent. And I feel like it's been a kind of larger cultural unveiling. But it's definitely something that is going to become even more blatant going forward, given the direction that the cultural trends are heading. And I feel like, honestly, a lot of the church is just I think, not woefully unprepared to communicate about these things as it is now. But a lot is very adequately prepared, again, and especially those who have been in churches of marginalized groups more broadly. So that being said, that's all interesting. We're running a little long, as I should have expected for a freeform episode. I will say there's one last topic I wanted to revisit.
I know you said there was something you wanted to say about condition for excellence. Is that or is that a different thing? Okay.
Yes. So maybe I'll close on this, just as a kind of an extra thought to that one, because this should be pretty quick, and also it helps putting it at the end because this might be a bit more of a sensitive topic. But
sure.
I was thinking about that, and I was thinking, the more you gave me that framework of condition for excellence, and I've been thinking about it since then and ruminating, and I'm like, I think that applies to a lot more things than we talked about there, because I think we talked mostly about
for sure.
Yeah, I think we talked mostly about the race element because that's pretty front and center and perhaps most apparent, but it's also, I think it applies to other things as well, and more things than just, pure pursuit of excellence or success, in the cultural term as well. Because I was thinking recently, for reasons, I've been thinking about hygiene.
Okay, hold on. Continue. I'm ready now.
Yes. Yeah. No, do I have your attention? No, I've been thinking about hygiene because there's something about myself that I've recently come to embrace more so than I think I have before. Because I used to think that, and I guess generally culturally, we do have some taboos around talking about hygiene. But that being said, I think, it's definitely a bit of a taboo. But I think more recently, I've embraced kind of the fact about myself that I actually like hygiene, which is weird to say. Like, I actually enjoy working on my personal hygiene and putting effort into it, and as well as just my presentation in general. I think that I've kind of closeted been that way for a while, but I think I've more so embraced that fact about myself in recent times, and it's kind of made me think about, it's just like, okay, but where did that come from? And I think to a certain extent, there's this aspect that there's this cliche about like neurodivergent people.
Sure.
And people, I think with disorders in general, right? That they are like basically unkempt, you know what I mean? Or like unkempt or, just kind of generally dirty or unpresentable or...
No, that's just depression.
Yeah, there's that. But you know what I mean? Right. That is a cliche that exists though. And
yeah, for sure.
And to a certain extent, right, as somebody who's like brand of neurodivergence, it results in just like less social intuition. A lot of that stuff, and who has like also social anxiety and so is very hyper self-conscious. There's this element where it's just like, okay, I don't want to be that. But I don't understand how to address that naturally, right? Like I have to learn it by certain experiences and, and in order for it to get addressed. And so it just kind of made me realize, I think that is another example of in which, I have been conditioned for excellence, right? Which is that is something that because of that cliche, right? And kind of like you were saying with the race element, right? Of not wanting to be associated with that stereotype. Right, there's this impulse to push away from that and to want to do the exact opposite. And that kind of drives you into making an effort at it that is perhaps at times disproportionate. But either way, like that is another factor that has entirely nothing to do with the race and nothing to do with, career or, progress or anything like that. That's just, I thought that was an interesting way in which it could be abstracted and applied to something completely different, because it doesn't just apply to, I suppose, ethnic minority experiences, but just like minority experiences in general.
Yeah. Or just the social pressure that certain groups will experience that will push individuals in a certain direction, right? Where if there is if there's an expectation, or if there's if there's a negative association with a quality that is kind of like even like tertiarily associated with a with an aspect of your identity, right? Like this could be generalized, like anything like that, right? Like it's not just race or where you lie on a spectrum, or it could be like what like social groups you're a part of, right? Like if you're the nerds or if you're the jocks, like you can have a negative association with that aspect of your identity, and then that drives you to do either the opposite or that drives you to be exceptional in a different way, right? You have a lot of examples of like these jocks who are just like, oh, like you're a meathead, but they have like straight A's, and it's like, whoa, you're really smart. It's like, yeah, I do not want to be a stupid jock. It's like that's that's the drive.
There's a lot of pressure to not be a stupid jock.
Yeah, it's like my body isn't going to be around forever. I don't want to be stupid. I don't want to be dumb. Like that's not. I don't want to be seen as that guy who can't talk about anything other than football, even though like that's what I love. But I don't want to be that guy, right? I don't want to be that individual who doesn't have anything outside of it. And so you have that social pressure, and I can apply to I think almost anything. I was using that as the kind of like gateway into that conversation for sure. But yeah, generally speaking, any aspect of someone's personality in society, there's probably some kind of negative association in there, like some kind of stereotype, some kind of like taboo or anything like that. And that can drive individuals to want to not do that or not be seen as that, which will then drive them towards being some kind of excellent, so some kind of special, right? Being outside of that,
right?
It's I am a nerd, but I also dress really well,
right? Exactly. Or even I think there's a certain extent to which I think my drive for fitness comes from that as well, right?
Yeah.
For physical prowess is the idea. I think I've got multiple things tied up in my particular identity that could be pushing against, right? It's just like there's the nerd element, there's the, neurodivergent element, there's all that stuff. But it's just like, there's a lot of things that are just a part of my identity that are associated with these negative stereotypes. That's just like, you know what? I want to be very hygienic. I want to be very well dressed. I want to be very physically fit, right? Mm-hmm. It's like all of those things are in ways reactions as well. They're not. I mean, I'm sure they have become drives in and of themselves.
Yeah.
And things that are like that I have even found love for. But it's also, that's probably not where it started, right? Mm-hmm. It started as a reaction.
I was gonna say it didn't happen organically. Like it does happen organically, but yeah, it is more reactionary where something is thrust upon you, and then because of that, your reaction then drives you to move in a certain direction.
Yeah. Yeah. So those are kind of the thoughts I've been wrestling with lately, is the way in which your conditioned for excellence framework applies to a lot more things than I initially suspected. Because the more I thought in that framework, the more I realized, that defines a lot of things about not only myself, but other people. I feel like that you've stumbled upon some sort of universal thesis here.
I'm wondering if this is like, this is just another way to kind of like articulate the, I don't know what to call this. Like conditioned for excellence was the best way that I came up with it. But there is another thing I think that is out there that is either similar or is the same thing, but repackaged, which is like succeeding, like spite success, where it's like just people succeeding purely in spite of because of a particular thing, where it's like
right.
I'm not supposed to be this good at this.
The expectations.
Yeah, exactly. In spite of the expectations, like I'm not supposed to be good at this, or I'm not supposed to be able to do this. So because of that, I'm gonna spite you by being successful. I'm gonna go against that expectation, against the history of that, and I'm going to succeed. Right?
Oh, it's like the Gattaca movie.
yeah.
It's exactly the plot of it,
Despite
right?
your genes?
Like Ethan Hawke. Yeah, he's born with normal genes, and he's just like, you know what? I'm gonna be like the most. Just by sheer force of will, like the most perfect person out there at like everything, and and do everything that you're supposed to only be able to do by having perfect genes, but just doing it naturally, despite society and your brother.
I don't remember the plot of that movie, but man,
for some reason I remember the plot of that movie. I haven't seen it since I was like a child, but for some reason I remember that because that kind of resonated. I guess it kind of resonated in a way.
We watched it in freaking biology class. That was it. That was all I saw. I was like, I don't understand. I don't know what's going on.
That was basically like, the gist of it, though.
Is that movie about eugenics?
I think it might be. All right, we'll call this now the Gattaca effect. That's what
There's a surprising amount of things that turns out to be about eugenics.
Surprise, eugenics. Yeah, Resident Evil is about eugenics.
Oh, shoot, you're right.
Yeah, well, explicitly, like, the Wesker program was a eugenics program, right? That's what its whole thing was. Yeah, it was designed.
Right, Albert Wesker's thing was like they were trying to breed super soldier perfect humans. Yeah.
Basically. Well, not even like super soldier perfect humans, but just like genetically perfect humans. Like, it was the result of like pure, like, it was purely a breeding program. All they did was like take people who had what Umbrella determines to be good genes, and literally just had them reproduce. And that's how you get the Wesker children. They're literally just the children of, the surrogate parents who are deemed to be genetically superior, which I think is a little on the nose, considering that they gave him like very German features of like blue eyes, blonde hair, and
there's a long culture of that.
yeah, for sure. I think that's definitely a reference.
Oh man, now I'm thinking about it. Now it's like, but like you also have like the similarities between like the Umbrella logo and like the Iron Cross, and it's just like, oh no, hold on, wait a minute, was Umbrella neo-Nazis?
Oh shoot. There was also a Neo Umbrella at one point.
So Raph. Open the can of worms.
Resident Evil. I think Resident Evil was just about Nazis.
Is it about Nazis? It turns out there's a lot of things also about Nazis.
This is fair. I would
like to talk about eugenics at some point because I have very strong opinions about eugenics.
Oh, do you?
Oh yeah. I'm struggling to come into acceptance of the fact that I might be somebody who believes in eugenics.
Ah, snap.
It's like
that out there.
What am I supposed to do about it?
Well, it's okay though because it's brown eugenics, so it's not problematic.
It's not problematic because no.
But either way,
before we end, you were talking about hygiene, right? And I want to send you a video that I watched literally like maybe 2 weeks ago about everything you just said. I think you're going to find it very fascinating. Yeah. So there's a channel that I follow called Answer in Progress, and I love it. Love that channel. The title of the video is How Soap Sells a Myth, and it's like this dive into like the cultural perception of like cleanliness. It's really fascinating. I'll send it to you, and also be in the show notes.
Interesting. Yeah. We'll make a note of that. So. Okay, you'll have to send me that because apparently it's exactly what I was talking about.
Because like when you said it's like about hygiene, I was like, hold on, quick reset. Because like as soon as you said that, this video popped into my mind, and I was like, I wonder if that's gonna be close. And it's like, no, yep, there it is. You're talking basically about the subject of that video.
Okay, well, fascinating. All right, well, thank you for the information. I'll look into that. But that being said, we need to wind this episode down because it's gone super long. Thank you all very much for listening. This has been the Hypercube podcast. This show is edited by Loryn Pacheco, mixed by Raphael Pacheco, with original theme music by Mono Memory. Until next time, we'll see you all later. God bless.
I'll see you later.